The silence in our Atlanta home was heavier than the scent of lilies from the funeral. It had only been hours since we laid my Walter to rest. I sat in his favorite armchair, the worn leather still holding the faint scent of his pipe tobacco, clutching the silver frame that held our wedding picture. My son, Jerome, and his wife, Brenda, walked into the living room. Their footsteps were too firm, too fast for a house in mourning. I looked up, expecting to see the shared grief that should have been on their faces. Instead, I saw impatience. Brenda, especially, had a cold clarity in her eyes. She placed a thick stack of legal documents on the mahogany coffee table. The sound was a sharp thud cutting right through the quiet. "Mother," Brenda said, her voice smooth but lacking any warmth, "we need you to sign these." I blinked, my mind still fogged by the eulogies and the weeping. "Sign what, dear?" "It was Father's last wish," Jerome added, though he would not meet my gaze. His eyes were fixed on a spot just over my shoulder. He wanted us to sell the company. The fog in my mind evaporated, replaced by a sharp, cold shock. "Sell Walter's community homes?" I whispered. "Jerome, your father loved that company. It was his life." "It is for the best, Mother," Jerome insisted, his voice hardening. "It is a burden. We need to liquidate. It is complicated." Brenda pulled a pen from her purse, an expensive-looking gold one, and pushed it toward my hand. "We are just trying to honor his wishes," she said. "Please, Mother, just sign." "Hello, everyone. Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from. It keeps our stories alive." I recoiled from the pen. My mind flashed back 50 years, to a young Walter and me, sketching our first logo on a napkin at a diner. He was covered in sawdust, his hands calloused, but his eyes were bright with a dream. "We are not just building houses, Ruby," he had said, grabbing my hand. "We are building futures. We are building a legacy for this community." Now, his only son was telling me to sell that legacy, and he could not even look me in the eye while he did it. I need time to think," I stammered. "This is too soon." "We do not have time," Brenda snapped. The mask of false sympathy was gone. "The buyers are waiting. Do you want to ruin your husband's last request? Do you want his name to be dragged through the mud when the company fails?" "Fails?" I was so lost. Walter had never said a word about failing. Jerome finally looked at me, his face set in a hard mask I did not recognize. "She is right, Ma. It is failing. It is over. Just sign the papers so we can all move on." He took my hand, my frail, spotted hand, and physically wrapped my fingers around the cold pen. He and Brenda guided my hand to the signature line. I felt the pen scratch against the paper. I was too weak from grief, too confused by their urgency, to fight. I watched like from a great distance as my own hand signed away my husband's life's work. Jerome and Brenda scooped up the papers immediately. "Thank you, Mother," Brenda said, already turning toward the door. "You did the right thing. We will handle everything from here. You just rest." They left the room. I heard the front door close, and then the sound of their car engine starting. They did not even stay for dinner. I sat alone in the crushing silence. A wave of regret, so profound it made me sick, washed over me. "Oh, Walter," I whispered to the empty room. "What have I done?" Just as that thought crossed my mind, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, sudden sound that made me jump. I walked slowly to the door, my legs unsteady. I looked through the peephole and saw a young man in a courier's uniform. I opened the door. "Mrs. Ruby Hayes?" he asked. "Yes?" He handed me a small, padded envelope and a clipboard. "This was sent for overnight delivery, ma'am. It was mailed yesterday by a Mr. Walter Hayes." My heart stopped. Mailed by Walter. The day before he died. I signed the clipboard with a shaking hand, took the package, and locked the door. I stared at the envelope. It was light, and I could feel something hard and square inside. My fingers fumbled with the clasp of the padded envelope. It felt impossibly light, as if it held nothing but air. But Walter had mailed this. He had held this in his hands just before I tore it open. Inside, there was no letter, no instructions, no key. There was only a picture frame. An old, familiar, dark wooden frame. Inside it was the photograph from our wedding day, 50 years ago. I was in my mother's lace dress, and Walter was impossibly young, his smile so wide it crinkled his eyes. I ran my thumb over the glass. Why this? Of all the things he could have sent, why send me a memory I already knew by heart? It felt like a riddle without an answer. I placed the frame on the mantel, next to a picture of Jerome at his college graduation. The contrast was jarring. The young, hopeful Walter in the frame, and the cold, distant son who had just walked out my door. I sank back into the armchair, my gaze fixed on that frame. That picture was not just about a wedding, it was about a promise. Walter's Community Homes was born from that promise. It was not just a business to us, it was our ministry. It was our answer to a prayer, a way to give back to the Atlanta community that had given us so much. We had poured our souls into those foundations. Walter always said we were not in the business of wood and nails. We were in the business of dignity, and I had just signed that dignity away. Because my son, my own flesh and blood, had lied to me in my deepest moment of grief. The next morning, I tried to approach him. The house was too quiet. Brenda was on her laptop at the kitchen table, her fingers flying, a small, tight smile on her face. "Jerome," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "About the company. You said it was failing. Your father never told me." Jerome did not even look up from his newspaper. "It was complicated, Mother. Dad did not want to worry you. But to sell it? To strangers? What about Mr. Henderson? What about the families we promised to?" "Brenda and I are handling it, Mother." He cut me off, his voice sharp. "You just rest. You have been through a lot. We have it under control." His tone was final. It was the voice you use on a child, not the woman who raised you. I was being dismissed. In my own home. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. I turned, defeated, and walked back toward my room. The house Walter and I had filled with laughter and prayer suddenly felt foreign, like a stranger's territory. As I passed the closed door of their bedroom, I heard Brenda's voice. It was low, but vibrating with an energy that was anything but sad. I paused, my hand on the hallway wall. I know I should not have listened, but I could not move. "He is wiring the deposit tomorrow," Brenda said. I heard the chink of ice in a glass. "The whole thing will be done in a month." Can you believe how easy it was? There was a pause. I held my breath. Then I heard her laugh. It was a sharp, triumphant sound that sliced right through me. The old woman signed everything. Not one question. "We will be rich, baby." Finally rich. The world tilted. My blood did not just run cold. It felt like it turned to ice in my veins. The woman in that room was not just my daughter-in-law. She was a predator, and I had just handed her the keys to my entire life. My hand was still on the wall, my knuckles white. The ice in my veins had turned to fire. I pushed open their bedroom door. Brenda was standing by the window, swirling the ice in her glass. Jerome was buttoning his shirt, his back to me. They both froze. Brenda's face was a masterpiece of deceit. Her shock melted instantly into a mask of sweet, condescending concern. "Mother, you frightened me. You should not be wandering around like that." "What did you just say, Brenda?" My voice was a low tremor, but it cut through the room. She let out a small, airy laugh. "What are you talking about? I was just telling Jerome." She looked at him, a silent command in her eyes. "I was just telling him we should take you out to dinner tomorrow, get you out of this house. You said, the old woman signed everything. You said you would be rich." Brenda's eyes widened, and she actually put a hand to her heart. "Oh, Mother, no." Her voice was pure syrup. "You must be imagining things. Your grief, it is making you confused. You are hearing things that just are not there." I looked at my son. "Jerome, is that what she said?" Jerome finished buttoning his shirt, straightened his cuffs, and finally turned to me. His expression was hard, annoyed. "Ma, you need to stop this. You are upsetting yourself. Brenda is right. You are confused. Now, we have to go out." He took Brenda's arm, and they brushed past me, leaving the scent of her expensive perfume and his cold indifference hanging in the air. I stood there, shaking, as I listened to their footsteps descend the stairs. I went to the living room window. I watched them get into their car. It was a new, flashy black sedan, the kind Walter would have called all flash and no substance. As they pulled out of the driveway, Brenda turned in her seat to look at Jerome. She was laughing. A full, genuine laugh this time. I did not need to hear the words. I knew what they were celebrating. They were celebrating their victory over the confused old woman. They were probably discussing the new mansion they would buy, the luxury vacations they would take, all with the money from my Walter's legacy. I was utterly and completely alone. I walked through the house, the silence amplifying every creak. This home, which had been my sanctuary for 50 years, now felt like a prison. My son and his wife were my jailers. I stopped in Walter's study. His pipe was still in the ashtray. His reading glasses were on top of a book about community architecture. My fingers traced the spine of the book. And then I remembered. It was about a year ago, after Jerome and Brenda's last visit. Walter had been quiet for a long time, watching the rain fall outside this very window. "What is it, my love?" I had asked, putting my hand on his shoulder. He had sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "Jerome has a good heart, Ruby." "I know he does." He paused, and his grip tightened on his pipe. "But that wife of his, she has a hunger that scares me. A hunger for things, not for purpose." His words echoed in the empty room, landing with a terrifying new weight. He had seen it. Walter had seen this coming. A sudden, restless energy filled me. I could not stay in that house. I grabbed my car keys for the first time since the funeral. I did not know where I was going. I just knew I had to move. I drove through the familiar streets of Atlanta, my mind racing. Walter had seen it. And what had he done? He had sent me a picture frame. It did not make any sense. I turned the corner onto the street where Walter's Community Homes headquarters stood. It was a modest brick building, the first one Walter had ever built. And that is when I saw it. A man was hammering a sign into the perfectly manicured lawn. The lawn Walter and I had planted azaleas on. The sign was a bright, garish red. For sale. Pending. It was happening. It was real. And it was happening faster than I could have ever imagined. I did not even put the car in park properly. I slammed the shifter, my hands shaking with a rage I did not know I possessed. I marched across the lawn, past the man with the hammer, and threw open the glass doors of the building. The lobby was different. The comfortable chairs Walter had picked out were gone, replaced by cold, modern plastic seats. The receptionist, a young woman I had never seen before, looked up, startled. "I need to speak to Jerome Hayes," I demanded. Before she could even buzz the office, Brenda emerged from the hallway. She was wearing a sharp, expensive-looking red suit, carrying a leather-bound portfolio. She looked like she was born to give orders. She saw me, and her face tightened, not with fear, but with annoyance. "What is the meaning of that sign?" I said, my voice echoing in the sterile lobby. "You told me you were managing the company, not selling it." Brenda walked right up to me, stopping so close I could smell her perfume. She spoke in a low, sharp voice, meant only for me, but the few employees in the lobby could feel the tension. They lowered their heads, pretending to work. "This is a place of business, Mother," she hissed. "You are retired. You do not have a place here anymore." "This is my home," I shot back. "Walter and I built this. You have no right." "I have every right," she cut me off, her voice like ice. "You signed the papers. Or did your confused mind forget that already?" She smiled, a thin, cruel smile. "You are too old to understand these complex deals. You would just get in the way." Her words hit me like a physical slap. Too old. Confused. In the way. She was painting me as a senile old woman. Just then, the door to Walter's office, my Walter's office, opened, and Jerome came out. He was holding a briefcase. He saw us, and for a second, he looked like a little boy caught stealing. "Jerome," I said, relief flooding me. He was my son. He would stop this. "Jerome, please. Tell her. Tell her she cannot talk to me like this. Tell her we cannot sell your father's company." I reached for his arm, my last hope. Jerome flinched. He pulled his arm back, his gaze sliding past me to the floor. He would not look at me. He just straightened his tie. "Brenda is right, Ma," he muttered, his voice thick with shame, but his words were firm. "You should not be here. You are making a scene. Just go home." He looked at his wife. "Let us go, Brenda. We will be late for the meeting with the buyers." He walked past me. Brenda gave me one last look, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph, and followed him. I was left standing in the lobby, surrounded by the whispers and pitiful stares of the employees. I had been publicly humiliated. I had been dismissed by my own son. I had been cast out from the house that Walter and I built together. I do not remember the drive home. It was a blur of hot tears and cold shame. I walked back into the silent house, the one they were letting me rest in, until they could move me to a home. I was defeated. They had won. They had the papers. They had the power. My eyes fell on the mantel, the wedding photo, the frame Walter had mailed with his dying breath. It was the only thing in the room that did not feel like a lie. I picked up the heavy wooden frame, my fingers tracing the carved edges. It felt solid, real. "Oh, Walter," I whispered, the tears blurring his smiling face. "What did you see? What were you trying to tell me?" I sat there, holding that frame, the image of my humiliation at the office burning behind my eyes. And suddenly, another memory replayed itself in my mind. The scene from 2 days ago. Brenda and Jerome in the living room, the stack of papers. But this time, I saw it differently. I saw it without the fog of grief. I saw Brenda's manicured red fingernail tapping, tapping, tapping on the signature line. I heard Jerome's voice, pitched to sound reassuring. "It is just standard fiduciary clauses, Ma. Power of attorney for the transition." Words I knew, but did not understand in the moment. Words he knew I would not question. I remembered the rush, the way their eyes darted to each other when I hesitated, the way Brenda's smile never, not once, reached her eyes. It was not grief I had seen on their faces. It was a deadline. They were not comforting a mourning widow. They were closing a deal. The sound of the front door opening jolted me back to the present. I heard their voices, light and cheerful. They were back from their meeting. I stood up, my legs stiff, still holding the picture frame. I met them in the hallway. "Mother," Jerome said, a bright, false smile plastered on his face. "We have wonderful news." Brenda held up a glossy brochure. The cover showed smiling, silver-haired people playing shuffleboard on a perfect green lawn. "We found the most wonderful retirement community for you. It is called Willow Creek Meadows. You will have your own little apartment, and there are activities. It is for your own good." The condescension in her voice, the "for your own good," lit a fire in me. "I am not going to Willow Creek Meadows, Brenda." The smiles vanished. "Mother, do not be difficult," Brenda said, her voice turning hard. "I am not leaving my home," I said, my voice shaking, but firm. "I am not going anywhere." Jerome let out a long, suffering sigh. He stepped forward, looming over me. "Ma, we do not have time for this. We are trying to take care of you, but you are not listening." "You are trying to get rid of me," I said. "You lied to me. You are selling your father's legacy." Jerome's face went dark. "You are wrong. And you are confused. And frankly, Brenda's lawyer warned us this might happen." "Warned you?" "He said that if you fought us," Jerome said, his voice dropping to a cold, menacing whisper, "we would have to petition the court." My blood froze. "Petition?" "To have you declared incompetent," Brenda finished, stepping up beside him. "To prove you are no longer fit to make your own decisions. We have the papers you signed, remember? You signed over the company because you knew you could not handle it." Incompetent! The word hung in the air, a vile, ugly thing. It was the ultimate threat, the ultimate humiliation. They would not just take my company. They would take my name. They would take my mind. I had nothing, no proof, no power, just their word against mine. And they had the signature. I backed away from them, defeated. I felt the last bit of fight drain out of me. They were right. I was just a confused old woman. I went to my bedroom and locked the door. I was terrified. I was completely and utterly alone. I sank onto the edge of my bed. My eyes fell on the old, leather-bound Bible on my nightstand, the one Walter had read from every single night. I reached for it, my fingers desperate for some comfort, for some anchor in this storm. My hand rested on the holy book. I prayed for guidance, for a sign, for anything. My other hand was still clutching the picture frame. I brought it into my lap, my thumb tracing the outline of Walter's face. My fingers moved to the back, to the simple wooden backing held in by small metal tabs. I traced the edge of the frame itself. And then, I felt it. My thumb brushed against the bottom edge of the wooden border, a small piece of the carved wood. It moved. It shifted under my thumb. It was not just loose from age. It felt different. It felt intentional. My breath hitched. I ran my finger over the loose piece of wood again. It was solid, but it definitely moved. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I turned the frame over, examining the back. The brown paper backing was old, but intact. No, the loose piece was part of the frame itself. I looked closer, my eyes straining in the dim lamplight. There it was, a tiny, almost invisible seam running along the bottom edge of the frame. This was not damage. This was a compartment. My mind reeled. Walter? My Walter? The most honest and straightforward man I had ever known? Why would he hide something? My eyes darted to the small desk in the corner of our bedroom. Walter's old silver letter opener, the one his father had given him, was lying in its usual spot. My hands were shaking. I grabbed the letter opener, its familiar weight cold in my palm. I went back to the bed, took a deep, shuddering breath, and wedged the thin, pointed tip into the hairline crack. I felt a slight resistance, and then a soft click. The bottom piece of the wooden frame sprang open on a tiny hinge, revealing a small, hollowed-out space. It was no bigger than a bar of soap, lined with faded black velvet. I think I stopped breathing entirely. Nestled on that velvet were two items. One was a piece of heavy, cream-colored paper, folded small and thick. On the outside, written in his strong, familiar cursive, were just 3 words, "My dearest Ruby." Beside it was something that looked completely out of place. A small, black, plastic, and metal object, a modern thing, a USB flash drive. I stared at the 2 objects. One was the past, a handwritten letter, the way Walter and I had always communicated. The other was the present, a piece of technology I barely understood, the kind Jerome and Brenda used every day. I reached in with trembling fingers and took them out. The letter felt warm, textured. The flash drive was cold and smooth. This was the package. This was what he had sent. Not just a memory of our wedding day, but a message from beyond the grave. I tried to unfold the letter. My fingers fumbled with the crisp edges. But my hands were shaking so violently I could not get a grip. My whole body was trembling. A new kind of fear washed over me, replacing the dread that Jerome and Brenda had instilled. This was a different fear. This was the fear of the unknown. What secret had my husband kept from me? What on earth was on this letter? And on this tiny, cold piece of plastic? I was still sitting on the edge of the bed, the folded letter in one hand and the cold flash drive in the other. My own personal earthquake. I was staring at them, my mind a blank wall of shock. I took a deep, steadying breath. "The letter first," I whispered. I steeled myself to finally unfold the paper. And then the telephone on my nightstand shrieked. The sound was so loud, so violent in the quiet room, I nearly dropped Walter's note. It shrilled again. I fumbled for the receiver, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked at the small screen. The caller ID read, WCH, main office. My heart gave a strange leap. Jerome? Was he calling to apologize? Was this whole nightmare a misunderstanding? I picked up. "Hello?" There was a ragged breath on the other end. "Miss Ruby?" It is Henderson. Mr. Henderson. He had been Walter's first hire, his right-hand man for 40 years. A man of deep, quiet faith and unshakable loyalty. Mr. Henderson was more family to me than my own son felt right now. But I had never heard him sound like this. He was weeping. A grown man, trying and failing to hold back a sob. "Mr. Henderson, what is it?" I said, standing up. "What is wrong?" "He fired me, Miss Ruby." His voice broke. "Jerome, your son, He had security escort me from the building. Me. After 40 years, he had me thrown out like a common thief. What? The letter crumpled in my fist. No, he cannot. He would not. He did, Henderson said, his voice raw with the insult. And that is not the worst of it, Miss Ruby. I had to call you. I had to warn you. He took a sharp breath. They are gutting the company. They are not just selling it as a whole. They are selling it off in pieces to a competitor. They are liquidating the assets for pennies on the dollar. I sank back onto the bed. Pennies on the dollar? That does not make any sense. The company is strong, your father said. It makes sense if you do not care about the legacy. Henderson shot back, his grief turning to anger. It makes sense if all you want is fast cash. They are selling the trucks, the new equipment, the lumber contracts. They are destroying Walter's legacy, Miss Ruby, burning it to the ground. His words hit me with a physical force. This was not just about them stealing my home. It was not just about them pushing me into a home to get my inheritance. This was about the community. The hundreds of families Walter and I had employed over the decades. The homes we had built, the parks we had sponsored. My son was setting fire to his own father's life's work, to his own name, all for a quick payout. The shame I felt was so profound, so deep, it burned away my fear. I ended the call with Mr. Henderson, my hand perfectly steady. The trembling was gone. The shock was gone. The confused old woman they had tried to create was gone. In her place was Ruby Hayes, Walter's wife. I stood up and walked to my bedroom door. I turned the brass deadbolt. The click was loud and final in the silent house. I was locking them out. I was locking the world out. I turned back to the bed. The letter and the flash drive were waiting. They were no longer a mystery to be feared. They were an arsenal. I looked at the empty, open picture frame on the dresser. "All right, Walter," I said, my voice low and clear. "Let us see what you left for me." I sat in Walter's armchair, the one he always read in, my back to the locked bedroom door. The house was silent. I was in a fortress of my own making. I unfolded the thick, cream-colored paper. His handwriting, once so bold and sure, was a little unsteady. But the words were pure, Walter. "My dearest Ruby," it began. My eyes blurred. I had to stop, just for a moment, and wipe them on the sleeve of my robe. "If you are reading this, then I am gone. And I am sorry, my love, for what I had to leave you to face." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Leave me to face? He knew. He knew I would be in a fight. I read on. "I know my time is short. The doctor was clear, and I chose not to burden you with my sickness. But I could not be blind to the other sickness in our home." My breath caught. "I know our son's weakness, Ruby, and I know his wife's greed. I have seen the way she looks at what we built, not with pride, but with hunger." It was a jolt, seeing my own dark thoughts written in his steady hand. He had seen it. He had known it all. I tried to talk to him. I tried to warn him that Brenda's ambition would consume him. But he is blinded by her, my love. He has chosen her. I had to read that line twice. He has chosen her. The finality of it, the quiet heartbreak in his words, was a physical blow. Walter had known his son had already made his choice, long before I did. "I could not risk our legacy," he continued. "I could not risk you. The company is your protection, and it is my life's work. So, I made a new plan. I could not stop them, but I could give you the power to." My eyes scanned the page, landing on the last paragraph. "This USB drive," he wrote, "it is my final insurance policy. It is the truth. Do not trust them, Ruby. Trust no one but Henderson. He is a good man, a loyal man. God keep you. I love you always, Walter." My eyes flew to the small black object in my lap. An insurance policy, the truth. I looked across the room. On the desk in the corner sat Walter's old laptop, the one he used to read his emails and watch sermons on Sunday mornings. I had not turned it on since he passed. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was not with fear. It was with a terrible, urgent purpose. I picked up the flash drive. It felt heavy in my hand, heavy with the weight of my husband's final act. I walked to the desk, opened the laptop. The screen glowed to life, showing his favorite wallpaper, a picture of the Blue Ridge Mountains from our 40th anniversary trip. I choked back a sob, my heart aching for him. I found the small port on the side of the machine. With a fumbling finger, I inserted the USB drive. A small window popped up on the screen. Open folder to view files. I clicked it. The folder opened. It was almost empty. There was no long letter, no complex financial spreadsheet. There was just one file. It was not a document. It was a video file, marked with the icon of a small film strip. It was named simply, in all capital letters, Insurance, INP4. My finger hovered over the trackpad. What had he recorded? What truth was so terrible that he had to hide it this way? I took a deep breath, said a silent prayer to the man in the photograph, and clicked play. The screen flickered for a second, and then an image resolved. My breath caught in my chest. It was Walter's office. His office at the company. The angle was familiar. It was from the webcam on his large desk computer, the one he used for video calls with architects. He must have turned it on to record, a silent, digital witness. The timestamp in the corner read 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, just before he. And there he was, my Walter. He was sitting at his desk, his back to the big window. My heart broke all over again. He looked so frail, so much thinner than I had allowed myself to see. He was wearing his favorite blue cardigan, but it hung loosely on his shoulders. He coughed, a deep, racking sound that he tried to muffle in his handkerchief. The office door opened, and Jerome and Brenda walked in. They did not knock. Brenda looked impatient, tapping her pen against her portfolio. Walter, we need to talk about the offer. The competitor is getting antsy. Walter held up a weak hand. Please, he said, his voice thin, reedy. The doctor called this morning. He says 6 months. Maybe less. I watched my son's face. I waited for the grief, the denial, the love. Jerome just stood there, his face blank. He glanced sideways at his wife. Walter continued, his voice pleading. With the time I have left, I need to ensure Ruby is taken care of. The company, it is her protection. It is her legacy, too. Brenda scoffed. A sharp, ugly sound of impatience. 6 months? We cannot wait that long, Walter. That competitor is offering a fortune. Now. We have to move now. I felt the bile rise in my throat. Wait for what? Wait for him to die. Walter looked at Jerome, his eyes desperate. Jerome? What is she talking about? Wait? And I watched, my vision blurring with rage, as my own son, my child, gave a small, firm nod. He put his hand on Brenda's shoulder. A united front. Brenda is right, Dad, Jerome said. His voice was cold, practical. A voice I had never heard him use with his father. It is a business decision. We sell. Now. While the offer is on the table. Walter looked like he had been struck. And your mother? What about your mother? This is her home. Brenda stepped forward, her voice like a knife. We give her a small allowance. Put her in a home. One of those nice ones near the park. She will not even know the difference. She is half gone already. Half gone. The words she had used to gaslight me. Jerome? Walter whispered. His voice was broken. That is your mother. Jerome straightened his tie. He would not look at the webcam, but he could not look at his father either. He looked at the floor. Ma is emotional. She does not understand business. This is the best way. For everyone. There was a long, terrible silence. Walter just stared at his son, the full, awful truth dawning on his face. He had seen the serpent in his own garden. Brenda smiled, a tight, vicious smile of victory. Good. I will call the lawyers and tell them to draft the preliminary sale papers. We will just need to convince her to sign when the time comes. They turned and walked out. The door clicked shut, leaving Walter alone in his office. He sat there, unmoving, for what felt like an eternity. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, a king betrayed in his own castle. Then, slowly, he lifted his eyes. He looked directly into the webcam. Directly at me. He did not speak. He just held my gaze, his eyes filled with a pain and a love so deep it crossed the boundaries of time and death. I saw a single tear trace a path down his weathered cheek. His hand reached up, toward the camera, and the screen went black. The video was over. I could not stand. My legs gave way, and I slid from the chair onto the carpet of my bedroom. I was hollowed out, devastated by the sheer, cold-blooded cruelty of it. But as I wept on the floor, a new feeling began to rise, pushing through the grief. It was a feeling as cold and as hard as steel. I was not half gone. I was not confused. I was armed. I stayed on the floor, for I do not know how long. The tears were hot, angry tears now. Tears for the man I loved, and the way he had been betrayed in his final, vulnerable days. I pushed myself up, my knees cracking in protest. I used the desk to steady myself. My spine felt like it was made of iron. The confused old woman was gone. The weeping widow was gone. In her place was Walter's partner. The video was horrifying. It was proof of their intent, their conspiracy. It proved they had been lying to me from the very beginning. But I looked at the dark laptop screen, and Walter's letter replayed in my mind. It is my final insurance policy. An insurance policy is not just proof of the crime. It is the path to restoration. Walter would not just show me the poison, he would have left me the antidote. I sat back down at the desk. I went back to the USB folder. The video file, Insurance, MP4, was still there. But my eyes, now sharp and clear, saw something else. Something I had missed in my haste, in my grief. It was a second file, right beside the first. It was not a video. It was a document icon, but it had a small brass-colored lock on it. It was password protected. The file was named Walter's True Legacy Docs. My fingers hovered over the icon. I clicked it. A small box popped up in the middle of the screen. Enter password. My heart sank. A password? Walter did not use passwords. Not for anything important. Or had he learned to? I typed Ruby. The box shook. Access denied. I typed Jerome. Access denied. I typed Walter, 123. Access denied. A small flicker of panic started in my chest. The answer was right there, just beyond my reach. I looked at the password box again. Underneath the blank field was a small, blue link. Password hint. I clicked it. A single, two-word phrase appeared. Our beginning. Our beginning. My mind raced. The diner where we had sketched the logo? The name of the church where we were married? The street of our first tiny apartment? I looked up. My gaze fell on the mantel, on the empty, violated picture frame that had started this all. The wedding photo. Not just the wedding. Our beginning. The beginning of our new life. The beginning of our dream in this city. I remembered the year. The year we married. The year we arrived in Atlanta with $50 in a jar and a dream of building things that mattered. The year our real life began. My fingers moved to the keyboard. I typed ATLANTA1968. I hit the enter key. The password box vanished. The document flickered and opened. It was not a letter. It was a scanned legal document, pages and pages of it. The header at the top was bold and unmistakable. Last Will and Testament of Walter J. Hayes. But Jerome and Brenda had the will. Or had they? They had never shown me a will. They had just given me fiduciary papers to sign, power of attorney forms. My eyes flew down the page, scanning the dense legal text. I found the section, Article 3, Bequests. My finger traced the words on the screen. To my son, Jerome Hayes, I read, I leave the sum of $1, and my deepest prayers that he finds his way back to the man I raised him to be. He gasped. A single dollar. A had disinherited him. Completely. My eyes raced down the page. All the remainder of my estate, it continued, both real and personal. including my full controlling interest in Walter's community homes and our primary residence at 412 Oakmont Drive. I leave, with all my love, to my beloved wife, Ruby Hayes. He had left me everything. Everything. There was one final clause. I appoint Mr. Elijah Henderson as senior advisor to the company to assist my wife in all matters of business, should she so choose. The document was dated, notarized, and signed by 2 lawyers just 1 month ago. This was his true will. The papers I had signed, the last wish Jerome had sold me, was a complete and total fraud. I sat back in the chair. The pieces clicked into place. Walter had left me 2 weapons. The video was the motive proof of their conspiracy. And this document, this was the legal bullet. I now had the motive. And I had the weapon. I did not waste a single second. I picked up my cell phone, my hand perfectly steady. I found the number for Mr. Henderson. He picked up on the first ring, his voice still thick with despair. "Miss Ruby?" "Mr. Henderson," I said. My voice was not the voice of the weeping widow he had spoken to just an hour before. It was clear and sharp, a voice I had not used in years. "It is Ruby." There was a pause on the line. I could hear his shallow breathing. "Yes, ma'am?" "Walter left us instructions," I said. "I need to see you. Not at my home. Not at the office. It is not safe." I thought for a second. "Meet me at Ebenezer Baptist. In 1 hour." "Instructions?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. "But, Miss Ruby, they are moving so fast. They have locked me out of the system." "In 1 hour, Mr. Henderson," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "God bless you." I hung up before he could say another word. I copied the video file and the true will onto the USB drive. I slipped the small black drive into my pocket, along with Walter's letter. I took his laptop and put it in my large handbag. I unlocked my bedroom door. The house was quiet, eerily quiet. Jerome and Brenda were probably out, celebrating their final victory, perhaps picking out new furniture for my house. I slipped out the back door, got into my car, and drove to the church. Ebenezer Baptist. It was where Walter and I had been married, where Jerome had been baptized. It was a true sanctuary, a place of profound peace and strength. Mr. Henderson was already there, sitting in the front pew, his head bowed. He looked like a defeated man. His shoulders were slumped, his hat clutched in his hands. He stood up when he saw me walk down the aisle. "Miss Ruby, I do not know what good this will do. I have been on the phone. They are shredding documents. They are." I did not say a word. I just sat down in the pew beside him. I took Walter's laptop out of my bag, set it on my lap, and opened it. I inserted the USB drive. I turned the screen toward him. "Walter left this for me," I said quietly. I clicked play on the video file, Insurance, MP4. I watched Mr. Henderson's face as he watched the betrayal. I saw the moment he understood. His sorrow turned to a deep, profound disbelief. His disbelief hardened into a quiet, righteous fury. His knuckles turned white on the back of the pew in front of him. When the screen went black, he was silent for a full minute, just breathing hard. That child," he whispered, shaking his head. "And Brenda, after all Walter did for them. That is their motive," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty church. "And this." I closed the video and opened the locked document. "This is our weapon." He leaned in, pulling his reading glasses from his breast pocket. He read the will. He read the part about the $1. He read the part about me inheriting everything. And he read the part about him being named senior advisor. He took off his glasses and roughly wiped his eyes with his handkerchief. He trusted me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He knew. The old man knew. He trusted us, Mr. Henderson." I corrected him gently. "He gave us the tools. Now, we have to finish the work." The defeated man I had met at the door was gone. Mr. Henderson's spine straightened. He nodded, the fire of 40 years of loyalty back in his eyes. "Yes, ma'am, we do." "I have a cousin," Henderson said, his voice suddenly low and conspiratorial. Marcus. He is a lawyer downtown, not one of these corporate sharks. He specializes in elder fraud. He hates people like them. Good, I said. Call him. We sat in that holy sanctuary for 2 hours, the two of us, plotting. We would let Jerome and Brenda proceed. We would let them think they had won. Henderson confirmed what I suspected. They are planning a big meeting, he said, Thursday, at the Hyatt Ballroom. They are inviting the buyers, some local press, to celebrate the new direction of the company. They are making a big show of it. Then that is where we will do it, I said. We will expose them, publicly. Mr. Henderson's face grew serious. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a new worry. Miss Ruby, there is one problem, a very big one. What is it? Those papers you signed, he said, his voice grim. The ones you signed the day of the funeral. Their lawyer. He is going to argue that your signature overrides Walter's will. He will say you chose to sell, that you were of sound mind when you signed. He leaned in, his voice a whisper. They will use your own hand against you. They will paint you as the one who betrayed Walter's legacy. We only get one shot at this. If we miss, they do not just win. They will use this to prove you are incompetent for good. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I went home and played the part of the confused old woman they so desperately wanted me to be. I let Brenda talk to me about Willow Creek Meadows. I nodded. I asked about the dining hall menu. She and Jerome were so pleased with my cooperation, so relieved that I had finally given up. "See, Ma?" Jerome said, patting my hand with a sickening condescension. "It is for the best. You will be so much happier there, with people your own age." He was already seeing me behind walls, out of sight and out of mind. His words were a constant, low-burning fuel. He was not just taking my company, he was erasing me from his life. Meanwhile, Mr. Henderson and his cousin, Marcus the lawyer, were working day and night. Marcus was a sharp, focused young man with old, wise eyes that held a fire for justice. He had been disgusted by the video and the will. "They are filing the final sale documents," he told us, in a secret call. "We are filing an emergency injunction to freeze the assets. But do not worry. They will not see it until it is too late." He told us to wait for the public meeting. "Let them build their own stage," he had said, his voice grim. "The higher they are, the harder they fall." Thursday arrived, the day of the celebration, the day my son and daughter-in-law would sign away their father's soul. Jerome and Brenda had left early, practically vibrating with excitement. Brenda was wearing a bright white suit, as if she were the bride at her own coronation. I did not dress for a funeral. I did not dress in black. I went to my closet, and I put on my navy blue suit, the one Walter always said made my eyes look sharp. I put on my pearls. I was not a widow today. I was the CEO of Walter's Community Homes. Mr. Henderson picked me up at 10 o'clock sharp. Marcus, the lawyer, was in the back seat, a thin briefcase on his lap. He nodded at me as I got in. "Miss Hayes, are you ready?" "I am," I said, my voice calm. "Let us go annul my husband." The Hyatt Ballroom was full. It was decorated in the gaudy colors of the Buyers Corporation. Men in expensive suits, the buyers. Their lawyers mingled with local business reporters, their cameras and microphones at the ready. At the front of the room, on a raised dais, was a long table, and in the center, beaming under the spotlights, were Jerome and Brenda. Brenda looked every bit the queen, her hand resting possessively on Jerome's shoulder. She was scanning the crowd, her smile wide and false. Jerome stepped up to the podium, which sickeningly bore the new logo of the Buyers Company. My stomach turned over. "Thank you all for coming," Jerome began, his voice slick and practiced, a voice I did not recognize. "This is a bittersweet day, of course. But we are here to honor my father's legacy." I had to grip Mr. Henderson's arm to stay standing. The audacity, the blasphemy of those words. "My father, Walter Hayes, was a great man," Jerome continued. "But he believed in the future. And this sale, this modernization, is the first step into that bright new future." He was met with polite applause. Brenda's lawyer, a man with a face like a hawk, stepped forward and placed the final contract on the table. Jerome picked up an expensive-looking pen. That was our cue. Now, Marcus whispered from behind us. Mr. Henderson and I began to walk down the center aisle. We did not rush. We just walked, our footsteps silent on the thick, patterned carpet. A few people in the back rows turned, then a few more. A ripple of confusion went through the room. The cameras, sensing drama, turned from the stage to us. Brenda saw us first. Her smile did not just fade, it shattered. I saw a flash of pure, unadulterated rage in her eyes. This was not part of her plan. Jerome stopped his speech, mid-sentence, his hand frozen over the contract. "Ma? Mr. Henderson? What? What are you doing here? I thought you were." "Resting." Brenda leaned over to a large security guard at the side of the stage. She pointed at me, her face contorted into an ugly snarl. "Get her out of here," she hissed, her voice just loud enough for the front row to hear. "Get that old woman out." The security guard, a large man, started toward us, his hand reaching for my arm. "Mr. Henderson stepped slightly in front of me, a protective gesture that warmed my heart. But before the guard could touch me, I stepped around him. I walked right up to the dais, climbed the 2 small steps, and took the second microphone from the podium. The room was dead silent. The applause had died. Every eye was on me. Jerome was frozen, his mouth open. Brenda looked like she wanted to strike me. I tapped the microphone. The soft thump-thump echoed through the ballroom. I looked out at the buyers, at the reporters, at the cameras that were now all pointed directly at my face. "I believe," I said, my voice as clear and strong as a church bell, "that you all should see my husband's true final wish." A nervous titter ran through the crowd. Jerome, recovering from his shock, let out a short, incredulous laugh. He leaned into his microphone, his voice laced with the same condescending pity he had been using on me for days. "Mother, please," he said, shaking his head at the audience, as if sharing a sad private joke. Do not embarrass yourself. We talked about this. You are upset, you are confused." Brenda, however, was not laughing. Her face was a mask of cold fury. She did not look at me. She signaled their lawyer, the hawk-faced man, with a sharp, jerking motion of her head. The lawyer stood up immediately, holding a sheaf of papers. It was the stack I had signed, my death warrant. He strode to the podium, shouldering me aside to speak into the main microphone. His voice was loud, booming, and full of legal authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the estate," he announced, "please accept our apologies. This is Mrs. Ruby Hayes. She is, as you can see, distraught." He tapped the papers in his hand. "What she has failed to mention is this: a legally binding, fully notarized document, signed by Mrs. Hayes herself, granting full power of attorney and agreeing to this sale. It is her signature that validates this entire proceeding." He turned to me, his eyes devoid of any compassion. "Miss Ruby, you have no power here. You have already given your consent. You have no authority. We have your legal signature." He then turned to the security guard, who was still hovering nearby. "Security, please escort this confused old woman out. She is trespassing." The room was thick with embarrassment. The buyers, the men in the expensive suits, shifted in their seats. They looked uncomfortable, but they were businessmen. A legal signature was a legal signature. The lawyer was right. It was over. I had lost. I looked at Jerome. He would not meet my eyes. He was staring at the contract on the table, as if it were the most interesting document in the world. He was letting this happen. Brenda's smile returned. It was a small, tight, vicious smile of pure, unadulterated victory. She had won. She had beaten me, using my own hand, my own grief, against me. She nudged Jerome's arm. "Sign it, honey," she whispered, the microphone picking up the sound. "Let's finish this." Jerome picked up the pen. He uncapped it. He was moving in slow motion, the hero of his own story, about to sign the deal that would make him a millionaire and cast his mother into the shadows. He lowered the pen toward the signature line. The security guard put his hand on my arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with me. Now." This was it. The false ending. The moment my husband's final warning came true, they were using my own signature to destroy me. I looked at the guard. I looked at the triumphant smile on Brenda's face. I looked at my son's lowered head as he prepared to sign away his soul. I took a deep, steady breath. I leaned into my microphone, my voice perfectly calm, cutting through the silence. "Perhaps," I said clearly, "this video will help clear up my confusion." I nodded to the back of the ballroom. Mr. Henderson, who had been standing by the audiovisual booth this entire time, nodded back. His hand went to the main projector, and Marcus, the lawyer, stepped out from the shadows, his briefcase in hand. Brenda's head snapped toward the back of the room. "What video? Stop them! Turn that off!" But it was too late. Mr. Henderson hit play. The giant projection screen above the stage, the one that had been showing the buyer's logo, flickered. Then it lit up, not with a pie chart but with Walter's office. My Walter, frail, small, and sick in his chair. A collective gasp went through the ballroom. The reporters, sensing blood in the water, raised their cameras. I watched Jerome's face. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with a confusion that was rapidly turning to panic. Brenda froze, her mouth open, her hand clutching her pearls. Then, on the screen, the office door opened, and their own images, younger, healthier, more arrogant, walked in. The audio was crisp, amplified by the ballroom's powerful sound system. We all heard Walter's frail voice. "The doctor says 6 months, maybe less." We all heard Brenda's sharp, impatient scoff. 6 months? We cannot wait that long, Walter." The room was dead silent. Every person was frozen, their eyes glued to the unfolding train wreck on the screen. The buyers' faces had gone from uncomfortable to stony, their eyes narrowing. We heard Walter's plea. "What about your mother? This is her home." And then we heard Brenda's voice, cold and clear, echoing through the silent room. "We give her a small allowance. Put her in a home. She will not even know the difference. She is half gone already." I looked at Brenda. Her face, which had been so smug, had drained of all color. It was a ghastly, pale white. She was shaking her head, whispering no, no, no. Then came the final betrayal. Walter's voice broke in. "Jerome, that is your mother." And my son's voice, the voice he was just using to praise his father, filled the room. "Ma is emotional. She does not understand business. This is the best way." Jerome dropped the pen. It clattered loudly on the table, the sound amplified by the microphone he had left on. He stared at his own image on the screen, a look of abject horror on his face. He looked destroyed. The video played out. We all watched Walter look into the camera, his single tear a silent indictment. The screen went black. For a full 10 seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The only sound was the low hum of the projector. Then, the hawk-faced lawyer, sputtering, grabbed his microphone. This is an invasion of privacy. It is edited. It is slander. We have a signed document." "You mean," I said, my voice cutting through his panic, "a document you coerced from a grieving widow?" I looked at the buyers. "You mean a document you got by telling her she was confused and half gone? You mean a document that directly violates my husband's actual, final wishes?" "She is lying!" Brenda shrieked, finding her voice. It was high and ragged. "There is no other will. That signature is legal." "Is it?" A new voice boomed from the back. Marcus, Mr. Henderson's lawyer, strode down the aisle. He was not holding a briefcase. He was holding a document, and he was flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. He stepped up to the podium, handed one document to the officers, and held his microphone. "This," he announced to the room, "is the true last will and testament of Walter J. Hayes, notarized 1 month ago." He pointed at me, leaving 100% of his estate and his company to his wife, Ruby Hayes. He then pointed, his finger shaking with righteous anger, at my son, and leaving Jerome Hayes the sum of $1. The room erupted in a storm of noise. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. The buyers were on their feet, shouting at their own lawyers. "Get us out of this. It is fraud." Brenda grabbed Jerome's arm. "Jerome, do something." But Jerome was paralyzed, his face ashen, staring at his hands on the table. Brenda looked at the police officers. She looked at the reporters blocking the exit. Her mask of civility was gone. She was a cornered animal. She shoved Jerome aside and made a dash for the side exit, the staff-only door. "Stop her!" one of the officers shouted. She burst through the door, but the officer was faster. He grabbed her arm. She fought, clawing at him, screaming. The other officer walked up to my son, who had not even moved. He just sat there, the pen lying in front of him, his life in ruins. "Mr. Jerome Hayes," the officer said, his voice grim, "you and your wife are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and for suspected elder abuse." They cuffed him. They cuffed Brenda, who was now sobbing, her white suit rumpled, her mask finally, truly, broken. I stood on the stage, watching them be led away, the cameras flashing in their faces. I felt a profound, aching sadness. But I also felt righteous. "Walter," I whispered, clutching the pearls at my neck. I did it. The fallout was immediate and absolute. The sale was, of course, stopped. The buyers, furious and humiliated, immediately filed their own lawsuit against Jerome and Brenda for fraud and misrepresentation. My son and daughter-in-law were facing a mountain of legal trouble. The evidence on the USB drive was ironclad. Their lawyer dropped them. They lost everything. They had to sell their new, flashy car and their over-mortgaged house just to pay their legal fees. I did not attend the trial. I could not. But Marcus, the lawyer, told me the judge was appalled by the video. They were found guilty on all counts. I did not rejoice. How can you rejoice at the ruin of your only child? But I accepted it as the harvest they themselves had sown. My first act as the rightful owner of Walter's community homes was to call Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "I believe you have a job to do, if you will have it." His voice, when he answered, was full of joy. "I will be there in 20 minutes, Madam CEO." We spent the next 6 months undoing the damage. We rehired every loyal employee Jerome and Brenda had fired. We canceled the liquidation sales and, with the help of the True Will, renegotiated the contracts they had tried to destroy. It was hard. It was the hardest work I had ever done. But for the first time since Walter passed, I felt truly alive. I was not just protecting his legacy. I was continuing it. The final scene, the one that truly mattered, came 6 months after that terrible day in the ballroom. I was standing on a small wooden platform in a sunny field on the east side of Atlanta. Mr. Henderson was beside me, holding a set of rolled-up blueprints. In front of us were all our employees, their faces smiling, their families with them. I unrolled the blueprints and showed them the design. It was not a set of luxury condos. It was a new, subsidized housing project, a community center, and a park, all to be named the Walter J. Hayes Legacy Project. Walter always said, I told them, my voice carrying on the warm breeze, that we were not just building houses, we were building dignity. And today, we continue that promise. A cheer went up, a real cheer, born of respect and shared purpose. Mr. Henderson put his hand on my shoulder, and we looked out at the future we had saved. That evening, I sat in my quiet home. It was mine again. The silence was no longer heavy and threatening. It was peaceful. I was in Walter's study, at his desk. I picked up the old wooden picture frame, the one that had started it all. I looked at our wedding photo, at the young, hopeful faces of the two people who had started this journey. And then I looked at my own reflection in the glass. I was no longer a confused old woman. I was not half gone. I was Ruby Hayes, the guardian of a legacy. I had found justice for Walter. And in doing so, I had found a strength in myself I never knew I had. My new life, my true beginning, had started. Did my story resonate with you? Which part of this family drama touched your heart the most? And what would you have done in my shoes? I would be honored to read your thoughts and your own experiences in the comments below. If you believe in the power of faith, dignity, and getting justice, please consider sharing this story with someone who may need to hear it. And please subscribe to this channel for more life stories just like this one. Thank you so much for listening. I am looking forward to reading your comments.